Welcome to the deep dive, where we really get into the details of key research papers.
Trying to make sense of the science.
Exactly. And today, we're tackling a really foundational paper in invasion ecology. It's called Global Patterns of Introduction Effort and Establishment Success in Birds.
Ah, yes, the Cassey paper from 2004. Philip Cassey and his co-authors.
Yeah.
Really influential work.
Definitely. So our mission today is to unpack this. Why do some introduced species, take hold in new places when most just fizzle out?
And we're looking at birds globally. It's a huge scale.
And digging into a factor that for a long time was sort of swept under the rug.
And it's so important because, as the paper itself highlights, moving species around the globe, that's a massive part of how humans are changing the environment. It's a growing issue.
Right. People have known this is important for ages, like since Elton's work back in the 50s.
Absolutely. Figuring out what makes an introduction successful is, well, it's critical for ecology, for conservation, for managing these impacts.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Before this paper, what was the thinking? People were trying to find the secret sauce, right? Looking at the birds themselves.
Yeah, exactly. They looked at, biological traits. Is the bird big or small? How many eggs does it lay? Does it have a naturally wide range? Things like that.
Or maybe the location, like, does the climate match its home? Are there lots of other species already there?
Precisely. But the results from all those studies were, well, they were a mess, frankly.
Oh, so?
Often contradictory. One study finds big birds do better, another finds small birds do.
Right.
Or they just couldn't explain much of the variation at all. The predictive power was really low.
So not much better than flipping a coin to guess if an introduction would succeed.
Pretty much.
Yes.
And lurking in the background was this theoretical idea that seemed obvious but was hard to test. Propagule pressure.
Introduction effort. Basically, how many individuals you actually release.
Or how many separate times you release them. The sheer amount of effort put into the introduction.
It sounds straightforward. Release more birds, better chance of success. Why was that so hard to study properly before?
The data problem. Just think about it, tracking down reliable records of every single bird release attempt across the entire globe, going back sometimes hundreds of years.
Yeah, that sounds impossible.
Close to it. For the vast majority of historical introductions, nobody knew the exact propagule pressure. So studies either had to ignore it completely.
Which feels like a massive omission.
It is. Or they use proxies. They'd guess, maybe, that a species with a big native range was probably introduced in large numbers.
But that's a big assumption. What if people were introducing rare birds in huge numbers, or common birds just a few at a time?
Exactly. If that human effort wasn't random, if people were biased in what they released and where they done, then ignoring effort or using bad proxies meant all those previous results could be seriously flawed, confounded.
So Cassey and colleagues decided to tackle that head-on. They wanted to do a global analysis using actual numbers, direct measures of effort.
Yes, for birds. A major group on a global scale with real effort data. That was the game changer.
The novelty wasn't a brand new theory, but actually compiling the missing data.
Precisely. It was about overcoming that historical data bottleneck.
Okay, let's talk about how they did that, the data itself. How do they define an introduction event?
They were careful. It meant any release of birds into a place they weren't native to. Importantly, they excluded releases done purely for conservation, like reintroducing a species to its former range.
Makes sense. And a location.
An island, or a specific governmental state, if it was on a continental mainland. So quite geographically specific.
And the effort metrics.
Two main ones. Propagule size, the total number of individual birds released in that event, and propagule number, how many separate release attempts happened over time.
And they were conservative with these numbers.
Very. They always used minimum estimates. If records were vague, they took the lowest plausible figure to avoid inflating the effort data.
So how much data did they end up with? It sounds like a monumental task.
It was huge. They identified 1,920 separate introduction events that involved 416 different bird species across the globe.
Wow, that's a lot of introduction.
It really is. But here's the crunch. Finding solid data for propagule size, the number of individuals, was harder. They only got that for 646 of those events.
Okay, so only about a third, roughly 34%. That immediately makes you wonder, is that third representative? Or is it biased somehow?
Exactly the right question, and they checked this very carefully. They found, yes, the data was biased geographically, meaning some places like New Zealand or Hawaii had much better historical records, so a higher percentage of their introductions had effort data. compared to, say, parts of South America or Africa.
Oh, okay, so the data coverage wasn't even across the globe.
Correct. But, and this is absolutely crucial for the validity of their study, they tested whether this subset of 646 events was biased in terms of success. And it wasn't. Even though the data came disproportionately from certain regions, the proportion of successful versus failed introductions within that data mirrored the overall pattern across different bird families and regions.
Okay, that's reassuring. So the data they did have, even if incomplete globally, was suitable for testing what factors correlate with success.
Exactly. It was a non-random sample geographically, but an unbiased sample regarding the outcome variable establishment success. That was a critical hurdle they cleared.
Great. And besides effort, they also collected data on all those other factors people had looked at before, right?
A long list.
Yeah.
7 species variables: body mass, native range size, how many offspring they have, migratory habits, sexual dichromatism,
Right.
and importantly, dietary generalism and habitat generalism.
How broad their diet and habitat use is. Okay.
And 5 event variables, things like whether it's an island or mainland introduction, the latitude, the difference in latitude from the native range, etc.
So they had the old variables, the potential confounders, and crucially, they now had the direct measure of human effort.
They had all the pieces. Now they could finally put them together and see what really mattered.
Right, let's get to the findings. First off, that suspicion about effort being non-random, was it?
Oh, absolutely. Hugely non-random. The amount of effort, the propagoal size, varied massively and significantly across different regions and different bird families. P less than 0.001, so highly significant.
Humans definitely played favorites. Where did they put most of their effort?
The biggest introduction efforts, the largest numbers of birds, were poured into places like New Zealand, North America, Hawaii, Canada, and Australia.
Okay, mostly temperate settler colonial regions, it sounds like.
Largely, yes. And taxonomically, the effort wasn't spread evenly either. Certain families got way more attention.
Which ones?
Top of the list were the Phasianidae, that's pheasants, quail, partridges, classic game birds. Also high effort for Musicapidae, old world flycatchers and chats, Sternidae, starlings and mynas, and Fringillidae, finches.
That really tells a story about why people were moving birds, doesn't it? It's not random ecological sampling.
Not at all. It screams human motivations. Game birds for hunting. Finches and starlings, often by acclimatization societies wanting familiar birds from home, or sometimes perceived pest control. It's driven by human desires, not biological representativeness.
Okay, so effort is biased by region, biased by bird type. But you mentioned an aha moment.
Yeah.
Something more complex.
Yes. This was really interesting. When they analyzed the variation effort, they found that while region and family mattered, the majority of the variation, 58%, wasn't between species or between regions. It was among different introduction events of the same species.
Whoa, hang on. Say that again. 58% of the difference in effort was within a single species?
Correct. So take the European starling. Yes, it belongs to a high-effort family, Sternidae. But the specific effort to introduce starlings to, say, New York might have been absolutely massive, while an attempt to introduce the exact same species somewhere else, maybe South Africa, might have involved only a handful of birds.
So the effort level was super specific to each individual attempt, not just a general rule for the species.
Exactly. Highly idiosyncratic, event by event. And that helps explain why predicting success for a given species was so hard before. You might be looking at a successful species, but not realize it only succeeded because of 1 or 2 gigantic release efforts, while dozens of small attempts failed.
That makes so much sense. It clarifies why the previous results were so messy. Okay, so now the main event. They built their statistical models, controlling for phylogeny, region, and this non-random idiosyncratic effort. What popped out as the main driver of success?
The result was incredibly clear. Once you count for everything else, introduction effort propagoal size is the single strongest correlate of establishment success, far and away the most important factor.
The more birds you release, the higher the probability they establish a population.
Dramatically higher. The statistical significance was extremely strong. P 0.0001 again. Human effort was paramount.
So after accounting for that massive human signal, did any of the biological traits still matter? Did anything about the birds themselves predict success?
Only one. Alongside propagoal size, the only other factor that remained significantly associated with success in their final model was habitat generalism.
So birds that can make a living in lots of different types of environments had a slightly better edge, even after accounting for release numbers.
That's right. Their ability to be flexible in where they lived was the only intrinsic species trait that held up. things like body size, native range, clutch size. Their effects largely vanished once effort was in the model.
And just to hammer home how important controlling for effort was, they did that comparison. They ran the model without the propagal size data, like the older studies had to.
Yes, they essentially replicated the pre-2004 approach.
Mm.
And what happened?
All the old factors came flooding back.
Instantly. Suddenly, having a broader native range seemed to predict success again. Being introduced to an island looked beneficial. Being less migratory seemed good. All those correlations that had confused people for years reappeared.
Wow. So it wasn't that native range caused success. It was just that humans tended to put more effort into introducing species that happened to have broad native ranges. The range size was acting as a proxy for human interest.
Precisely. It's a classic confounding variable problem. Those factors weren't directly causing establishment. They were correlated with the real cause that wasn't being measured, the human effort.
That is such a powerful demonstration. It really underlines the absolute necessity, as they say, for invasion research to grapple with propagal pressure. You just can't ignore it.
It became a fundamental requirement after this paper. You have to account for effort, or you risk completely misinterpreting your results.
So thinking bigger picture implications, this study showed, for birds at least, on a global scale, it's mostly about us, about human activity.
Largely, yes. Propagal pressure, driven by human choices and actions, is the primary determinant of establishment success for this entire group of animals.
And that holds true no matter why we move them. Hunting, wanting pretty birds, trying biocontrol, even accidents.
The underlying reason for the introduction didn't matter as much as the sheer scale of it. More released individuals equals a higher chance of sticking, regardless of the initial motive.
Which leads to a fairly stark policy implication, I suppose.
It does. If you want to reduce the number of successful invasions, the most effective lever you have is to reduce the number of non-native individuals being released into the wild in the first place.
Simple in principle, but probably very hard in practice.
Extremely hard. As the authors themselves noted back in 2004, and it's even more true today, global trade and travel are constantly increasing, creating more pathways and potentially larger numbers for introductions, intentional or accidental.
Now, there was one more layer of complexity, wasn't there? While effort is key, the relationship isn't perfectly uniform everywhere.
That's a really important nuance, yes. While more effort generally means more success, the exact steepness of that curve, how much bang you get for your propagal buck, so to speak, differs.
What's up?
It varied idiosyncratically between different geographical regions and different bird families. So, releasing 100 birds of species X in region A might give you a different probability of success than releasing 100 birds of species Y, or even species X in region B.
So the efficiency of effort isn't constant.
Correct. And interestingly, when they looked at the average success rate across regions and the average propagule size across regions, they found no correlation between the two. Same for families.
Wait, so regions that generally had high average effort didn't necessarily have high average success rates?
Exactly. Which is counterintuitive at first, but it points to this underlying variation in how effectively effort translates into success, depending on the specific context in the place, the species family.
So effort is king, but the local context modifies its power.
That's a good way to put it. And this leads directly to what the paper flagged as a key area for future research, which is why? Why does the relationship between effort and success vary so much between regions and taxonomic groups? What are the local environmental factors or the specific biological traits interacting with effort that make introductions more or less likely to succeed given a certain level of effort? That interaction became the next big question.
Understanding those modifiers. Fascinating. Okay, let's try and sum up this deep dive. We started with decades of confusing results about why introduced birds succeed or fail,
Wrestling with lots of potential biological and environmental factors.
only to find, through this massive data compilation effort by Cassey and colleagues, that the single biggest factor was hiding in plain sight but hard to measure: human introduction effort, propagal pressure.
Right. The sheer number of individuals released is the dominant driver, overshadowing most of the intrinsic biological traits people had focused on. Habitat generalism was the main trait that still held some ground.
It really shifted the focus from the biology of the organism to the behavior of humans as the primary explanation for invasion patterns at this scale.
It did. And perhaps the lasting message for anyone thinking critically about complex systems, ecological or otherwise, comes from that confounding effect.
Always ask if there's a hidden variable.
Precisely. Always question whether the correlation you see is truly causal, or if there's something else, maybe something related to how the system is being observed or manipulated, like non-random human effort that's actually driving the pattern you think you understand. It's a powerful lesson in scientific humility.
A brilliant insight from a landmark study. Thanks for unpacking that one with me.
My pleasure. It's a paper that really changed the field.